If you've ever wondered why you or someone you know is emotionally distant and struggles with intimacy, then this video is for you. Hello and welcome to my channel, Healing with Charlie, where I share tips and information to help you begin healing your attachment style. Today, I'll be discussing the dismissive avoidant attachment style. In this video, we'll break down what the dismissive avoidant attachment style is, its characteristics, its impacts on your relationships, and how you can actually start to heal this attachment style. So what is an avoidant attachment style? Basically, somebody with an avoidant attachment style has the core fear of intimacy. They get spooked. They are often very afraid when a relationship becomes very close, very intimate, and begins to feel very real. People with an avoidant attachment style are very skilled at suppressing their emotional needs and often prioritize self-sufficiency. For many, it develops during childhood and continues into adulthood, although some people have become avoidant after dating someone with a severe anxious attachment style. Avoidant attachment usually develops during childhood, and you more than likely had inconsistent and emotionally unavailable caregivers who were sometimes downright neglectful. When your caregivers are unreliable, you learn to develop an avoidant attachment style as a coping mechanism. And it makes perfect sense because you learned not to rely on others for emotional support. Rather than continuing to be let down and disappointed, you instead learned how to take matters into your own hands when it came to your emotional support. And you did this by learning how to suppress your emotions. It's often easier to push those emotions down than to accept the reality that your caregivers are not reliable. And when you're young and you can't necessarily move out of your house or move into a new place or an apartment, that's one of the amazing things that your mind can do to help you cope. You unfortunately learned how to emotionally support yourself in ways that don't fully benefit you when it comes to relationships later in life. Now, none of this is to shame you or the people that have helped to shape your avoidant attachment style. But in order to heal this attachment style, it's important to recognize where it comes from and that you are not to blame for your own attachment style. And the same also applies to other insecure attachment styles like the anxious preoccupied and the fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment style. So what are some of the characteristics of somebody who has an avoidant attachment style? Although some of these signs may be a little bit more general, it's important to consider if these characteristics have shown up in your personal life at any point. The first sign is emotional independence. Given you're an emotional army of one and you've learned to rely on yourself, you tend to value independence very highly. It can often be very difficult for you to open up with other people. And you can often feel like you're a loner in the friend group, or you have a very difficult time connecting and bonding with your partner. It creates this deep-seated feeling that there's something inherently wrong with you, and that even if you're in a relationship, you still feel alone. But what many avoidants don't realize is that this is usually a sign of their deep core wound, which is essentially their fear of intimacy. Given in the past, at some point, you reached out to somebody, whether it was a partner or a caregiver, and you put yourself on the line and you needed emotional support, they weren't there for you. And that innately taught you that you were not of value. You were not worthy of emotional support. And because of that rejection, you've actually learned to fear intimacy as a self-protection mechanism. And now you can kind of understand why avoidants tend to appreciate their independence. When they rely on themselves, when they are truly alone, the risk of them being hurt is far less. You essentially learned that intimacy is bad because in the past you were let down and disappointed by someone who, quote unquote, cared for you. And given you've learned to be independent as a coping mechanism, you tend to run or shut down at the earliest sign of real intimate connection. One of the other consequences of nurturing an avoidant attachment style means you're going to have difficulties expressing your feelings. When you have a lifetime of not relying on others emotionally by sharing your feelings, you lose out on the opportunity to learn how to communicate about those feelings with other people. Whether that's because you were with someone that was emotionally unavailable or your parents never validated your needs, the effect is still the same. You cannot know how to communicate in a way that you essentially haven't been shown. It's like trying to communicate in English to somebody that only understands Spanish. Since you've spent so long suppressing your needs and feelings, it can actually be very difficult to talk about them in intimate connections. And unfortunately, this can result in misunderstandings and miscommunications in relationships, which can often lead to resentment between both people. Try to think of talking about your feelings as a muscle. You haven't spent the time growing and flexing that muscle, so naturally it presents itself as an imbalance in your life. With a consistent routine and lifestyle change, you can actually learn to grow and strengthen this muscle, but you have to be willing to take the risk to let your partner validate your feelings. The only way you can do that is by starting to open up and share those feelings. And that's ultimately the first step to healing this attachment style. Is it feels natural to run. You might be like a runner and a track star, but you have to learn to slow down and turn to others for emotional connection when it feels like you need to step away. Also, given you've spent a lifetime of not relying on other people, you've actually become very good at learning how to get things done alone. Given you're overly self-reliant as a learned coping mechanism, asking others for support, seeking assistance, and asking for help can actually be really difficult for avoidance. Again, you've had a lifetime of knowing that you should avoid asking others for help because they're unreliable. So naturally, when you try to do it, you're not going to be very good at it. Over time, this can actually cause both people to feel resentful in that connection. The avoidant will feel resentful because they feel as though maybe their partner is not actually taking initiative to help them, but they're not actually doing the work to communicate that. And then the anxious will become resentful of their avoidant because their avoidant isn't extending an opportunity to show that they care as a bit of connection. Avoidant attachers are also really good at detaching from their emotions. They can almost turn off certain parts of their brain in order to not feel the pain and stress of those emotions. It is truly quite incredible. And it's one of the reasons why many anxious attachers feel like their avoidant partners can suddenly switch from being warm to suddenly being very cold. One thing that's important to remember for avoidance is because they've had caregivers that were emotionally unavailable or partners that didn't validate them, they have a deep-seated sense of shame and guilt as if they're not good enough and that they can't take up their own space and have their own feelings because they've spent so long suppressing that for those around them. And so because of all of this, intimacy and feelings are genuinely scary to many avoidants, and they've learned to actually detach from their emotions and push down those feelings of shame and guilt just to cope with the stress that they don't know how to manage. For avoidance, this can manifest itself in a few ways. One way is when avoidants will simply say that they're fine when they know deep down they're not. However, because they're so good at disconnecting from their emotions, it means that they may have a very good poker face, and their partner might not even know otherwise that something is wrong with them. They might think that they're fine because they've said they're fine. And because of this, they're really good at masking and hiding who they truly are and how they feel because they don't want that to be brought out of them. They don't even want to broach that conversation because that in and of itself is scary. The risk of being seen is the risk of being rejected. And because of that rejection avoidance faced earlier in life, where they learned that intimacy and connection is unsafe, it's why they tend to detach from the present situation. If you've ever been in a fight with an avoidant, you may have often wondered if they're truly listening to you, if they even see where you're coming from or what it is you're trying to get across to them. And they may even look like a space case. They may be looking out into the distance. They hear you, but they may not be able to fully process what you're saying because everything about them, their mind, is telling them to shut down for their own protection, because in the past, it's served them as a skill that's helped them to survive. And right now in that moment, it's telling them to do the exact same thing because it doesn't know any better. And that's the issue with avoidant attachment styles, is it makes you think something is there when it isn't. And it's the same for a lot of other attachment styles as well. But what makes the avoidant attachment styles so unique is their fear of intimacy and their fear of rejection, which is coupled with their deep sense of shame and guilt for even having feelings to begin with. And all of this just manifests as a person that is so skilled at masking their emotions or pushing it down or not even wanting to talk about them because it's safer to do that than to take the risk and put yourself out there. It's sometimes just easier to put on a smile for everyone else than to truly open up, because we've learned as avoidance, that is very risky. And as a result, avoidance can come off as distant or sometimes just aloof in relationship, as if they're kind of like out in space and they're not really present and grounded in the connection. So despite all of these traits and characteristics, there is still much an avoidant can do to begin healing their attachment style. The way I like to think about it is, when you're an avoidant, the best way to heal your attachment style is to start doing the opposite of what feels right. When a stressful situation comes up, rather than becoming defensive or shutting down and walking away, do the opposite. Try to understand where the other person is coming from, but instead of trying to walk away and shut down the conversation, lead with curiosity. Ask them questions about why they're feeling a certain way, or what you can do differently to make them feel better next time. And that'll go a long way, because when you're doing that, you're doing two things. You're learning how to communicate on a level that treats the other person as an equal. It gives them the opportunity to feel like it's an equal exchange of feelings and communication within that relationship, but you're also learning how to talk about your own feelings. You're also learning how to share those feelings with that other person, and you're giving them an opportunity to prove to you that not everyone is unreliable. So in the end, it's a win-win situation for both parties. This one can be very hard for avoidance, but communicating openly and honestly with others can help you to learn how to communicate your feelings and also learn that not everybody is unreliable. The other thing I like to stress for avoidants who are healing their attachment style is to be patient with yourself. It's not a race, it's a marathon, and you have to understand that you've had a lifetime of learning how to cope within these mechanisms that have helped you feel secure. It takes a lot of time to reprogram that subconscious method of learning how to navigate messy situations. And it takes some intentional work as well. You have to be willing to do the opposite of what feels right, to communicate openly and start learning to trust others with your emotional vulnerability. Another way to begin healing your avoidant attachment style is learning how to set boundaries in a healthy way. Both anxious and avoidance suffer from a lack of boundaries. It's what makes that anxious avoidant relationship so intoxicating and basically so explosive. If both people can learn how to implement healthy boundaries where it feels like both people are getting their needs met, then they can actually start to show up and be there for the other person on a equal level playing field. And when it comes to healing your avoidant attachment style, I would recommend a mix of personal, individual therapy and couples therapy if you're in a relationship and you're having recurring issues. Both of those settings will actually help give you the avenue to communicate about your needs, but also learn a thing or two about validating your partner. That's really great because it will help you build a stronger foundation that you can use to communicate with your partner, but also still feel like you have your own corner and side in the relationship. And seeking the professional help of a therapist will honestly speed up your healing process so much. I cannot tell you how quickly healing my attachment style became when I started going to my own personal therapy. I had a place where I could share my feelings, emotions, and vulnerabilities with someone in a judgment-free environment, but they were still there to help keep me accountable without the stress and pressure of a relationship. So if you have the opportunity to seek therapy and you're interested in healing your attachment style, I would highly recommend that. Avoidant attachment is an incredibly complex and deeply ingrained attachment style. Understanding it, the ways it manifests in your relationships and impacts your partners, can actually help you to encourage and promote healthier connections with others. Attachment styles can only change with dedication, patience, and understanding. It's not a life sentence, and it's something that can be healed over time. If you found this video informative or helpful in any way, then please take the time to hit the like button and share it with somebody who might benefit from it. As always, please leave your thoughts and questions in the comments down below. I love hearing from you. Thank you for watching, happy healing, and I'll see you in the next video.